I am Dr. Nandita Kaushal, Senior Assistant Professor in the Department of Public Administration, University of Lucknow, Uttar Pradesh. I am going to present before you the module whose title is Levels of Public Policies Formation. Objectives. This unit highlights policy making and the importance of executive body. After going through this unit, you will be able to understand the role played by executive in parliamentary form of government, explain the role played by cabinet in shaping public policies, explain the role played by Prime Minister's office. Starting with introduction, the executive has the final say in running of the state. The executive is the immediate or proximate policy maker and closest to the point at which policy decisions are made. Modern governments everywhere rely on executive leadership, both in policy formulation and policy implementation. In most developing countries, the executive undoubtedly plays a larger role in policy formulation by virtue of greater concentration of power in the government. The Indian Constitution established a parliamentary type of executive in India, both at the center and the states. Although the executive power is vested with the president at the center and the governors in the states, it is actually exercised by the Council of Ministers, which is drawn from the legislature and is responsible to it. The Council of Ministers is a three-tier organization consisting of cabinet ministers, ministers of state and deputy ministers. The council itself meets rarely and all the policy functions are performed by the cabinet. Policy making power and role of the executive are examined under the following sections: role of cabinet, role of prime minister, role of secretariat, ministries and departments, role of administrative officials, and role of National Development Council. Role of the Prime Minister. In the words of Harold Lasky, the Prime Minister is the central to the life and death of the cabinet. Khera opines that the Prime Minister represents the whole of the executive government in a way that no single member of the Council of Ministers or even the whole of the Council of Ministers can. There has been a great deal of discussion in the recent years as to the relative powers which the Prime Minister and other ministers enjoy within the Council of Ministers generally and the Cabinet in particular. There can be little disagreement with the fact that the powers of the Prime Minister have increased in the recent years. The Prime Minister of India always enjoys a special position in the realm of policy making, and other ministers play varying levels of subordinate roles. In a democratic setup, the Prime Minister is thought to obtain power from the nature of contemporary elections. Individual members of Parliament and the state legislature depend on the popularity of their leaders in general and the projected Prime Minister in particular for their electoral victory. The Prime Minister is thought to exercise control over the cabinet decision making process. In areas of external affairs, defense and economic affairs, he takes a personal interest. He appoints and removes the ministers, reshuffles his cabinet and the government posts among the chosen members of the government and the backbenchers. Few ministers resign in protest against policies they dislike because resignation would damage the credibility of the government as well as their own political future. The possibility of resignation and therefore injury to the reputation of government certainly constrains the Prime Minister in deciding how to deal with complex issues. As the political head of the civil service, the Prime Minister exercises control over the machinery of government. Through the Appointment Committee of the Cabinet, of which he is the chairperson. The Prime Minister takes decisions regarding appointments to the posts of administrative secretaries, chairmen, managing directors and general managers of state-owned public corporations, companies and enterprises, including Governor of Reserve Bank of India and other appointments which require the approval of the Government of India. Brown remarks about the Prime Minister's control of cabinet decision making, but helpful though he may be, the Prime Minister can only defy a cabinet majority at his own peril and by putting the fate of his government in the balance. There is nothing unusual about a Prime Minister in the course of cabinet discussions being forced to modify his views, compromise or keep his mouth shut. It would therefore be right to say that cabinet decisions are taken by the Prime Minister which may put the fate of his government at balance. The decision on the declaration of the emergency in 1975 was made outside the cabinet, which was informed about the decision only after it was declared. On the whole, it becomes difficult to assess the relative power of the Prime Minister within the cabinet. His power is evident when he is, first, defending his own position as a leader and determining the political futures of his parliamentary colleagues. Second, appointing and removing ministers and reshuffling cabinet posts. Third, taking the initiative in dealing with major issues of foreign affairs and in the formulation of broad socio-economic policies. Fourth, controlling the machinery of government and the appointments to the most senior administrative posts. Besides, there are large number of advisors to the Prime Minister on policy and related matters. The Prime Minister appoints such incumbents as advisors to the Prime Minister on administrative reform, economic affairs, science and technology, and cultural affairs. While the Prime Minister can exert exceptional influence on the policy decisions through the assistance of the Cabinet Secretariat, it is now widely accepted that a Prime Minister has to obtain the support of his colleagues for his decisions and cannot obstruct discussions on matters which a minister wishes to bring before the Cabinet. It may thus be concluded that the vast majority of policies approved by the legislature are initiated by responsible ministers in consultation with the Prime Minister after having been planned within the department and after consultation with affected interests. Next, coming to the role of Cabinet. In a parliamentary form of government, for example in India, the office holders, that is, those who occupy formal offices prescribed by the Constitution as authoritative, who are immediate or proximate policy makers, are the members of the Cabinet. Generally, it is the Cabinet which shapes the public policies. The first source of the Cabinet is the rights conferred upon its members by the Constitution. The Cabinet decides the policies which are placed before the Parliament for its approval. Cabinet is the real directing and controlling authority both in administration and in legislature. For Jennings, the Cabinet is the core of the constitutional system. Cabinet power flows from the principle of unity. The Cabinet acts as a collective body where ministers take an integrated decision. The principle of collective responsibility enables the Cabinet to expect that its decisions will be implemented as well as defended publicly by individual ministers. In this context, Mackintosh writes, it is essential for a strong government to show a united front in the face of criticism. This ensures a unity of purpose. The Cabinet is able to control and coordinate the work of the executive through the Cabinet Secretariat. In India, the Cabinet Secretariat prepares the agenda for Cabinet meetings, takes minutes, circulates decisions and follows them up and sees that action has been taken in the department. In England and in India, each minister, whether or not in the Cabinet, receives the decision of the Cabinet and it is his responsibility to instruct his department to take decisions as far as they need departmental action. The party system in cabinet government enhances the power of the executive leadership, which can control a parliamentary majority. The executive is expected to acquire legislative support on the policies presented to the parliament by calling on party unity and loyalty. The broad theoretical framework of the cabinet government in India is derived from the British model. The Cabinet in India acts as a collective body where minister takes an integrated decision and acts as a decision-making body on broad policy outlines as well as specific matters related to it. The Cabinet deliberates on major problems of policy and administration. Different kinds of policies affecting the Federation are analyzed in detail in the Cabinet before they are presented to the Parliament for their approval. But as the Cabinet itself as a whole has to be persuaded for the correctness of most of the decisions made. Although the Union Cabinet has a very important and challenging role to play in the policy decisions, it is not without shortcomings. For example, during the emergency in 1975, it was reduced to mockery. Madhu Limaye points out within the cabinet, ministers are afraid to speak out their mind. Cabinet meetings are not the forum of serious discussion of policies. They are the occasions for competitive adulation of the leader. Next, coming to the role of cabinet committees. On the analogy of the pattern evolved in the British parliamentary system, Cabinet committees have been constituted at the union level for speedy disposal of business of the Cabinet. It may be said that the real business of collective decision making in the central government takes place in Cabinet committees rather than the entire Cabinet. In this context, Morrison observes, this device enables ministers to bargain and compromise with each other and thus reduces pressure of work upon the Cabinet. Consequently, it is left free to devote itself to more important matters. These committees facilitate coordination in particular in well-defined fields of administration as well as affordable opportunities for reconciliation of divergence of views. Thus, ministers who are not members of the Cabinet are members of one of the more committees. The number, scope and membership of these committees vary from time to time to suit the situation confronting the Prime Minister. A committee comprises 3 to 8 members. The chairman of a committee is either the Prime Minister or a Cabinet Minister. The Cabinet makes use of Cabinet committees to facilitate decision making in areas of political and economic significance. These committees change according to their requirements or on situation or occasionally. Ad hoc committees are set up for a specific purpose. 4 such committees have acquired importance with the government in power. First is the Political Affairs Committee, to deal with all important political questions relating to domestic and foreign policies. Second, the Economic Affairs Committee, to direct and coordinate government activity in the economic field and generally to regulate the working of natural economy. Third, the Committee on Parliamentary Affairs, to watch the progress of government business in Parliament and to scrutinize and consider the attitude of the government on all non-official bills and resolutions to be presented to Parliament, to maintain a review from all India point of view of legislation undertaken by state legislatures. Fourth, the Appointments Committee to consider all recommendations and take decisions in respect to certain specified appointments pertaining to the Central Secretariat, public service enterprises, financial institutions, and so on. Next, the Administrative Reforms Commission 1966 to 1970 was critical of the functioning of some of these cabinet committees and made suggestions as follows. It is also essential that each cabinet committee meets regularly so that sustained attention is given to complex problems and the progress of implementing important policies and programs is kept under constant review. According to Ashok Chanda, there is the need of introducing decentralized coordination by grouping ministries with interrelated functions together and placing these groups under the general supervision of senior ministers without portfolio. The purpose of constituting cabinet committees for securing coordination and for arriving at quick policy decisions might also be largely defeated, since these committees now include a large number of cabinet ministers. Next, coming to the role of Prime Minister's office. The Prime Minister's office since June 1977, initially called as Prime Minister's Secretariat, was set up in August 1947 to assist the Prime Minister in the discharge of his functions. The institutional policy framework has been greatly altered since 1965, when Lal Bahadur Shastri, the second Prime Minister of India, created an independent Prime Minister's Secretariat. Over the years, especially under the Prime Ministership of Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, both the role of Secretariat and its functions have grown in complexity and importance. The main task of PMO is to enable the Prime Minister in the performance of his duties as the head of the government. It is responsible for assisting the Prime Minister in maintaining, on the official side, liaison with the President, Union Ministers, Governors, Chief Ministers, foreign representatives and others, and on the public side in handling various complaints from the public. The functions of the Prime Minister's office are briefed as following. First, to help the Prime Minister in performance of his duties as head of the Union Executive. Second, to help the Prime Minister in the discharge of his functions as the chairperson of the Niti Aayog, that is, National Institution for Transforming India. Third, to deal with critical and delicate issues, those are addressed to the Prime Minister. Next, to provide assistance in examining of the cases submitted to the Prime Minister for orders under prescribed rules. The Prime Minister's office, headed by Principal Secretary, who may or may not come from the civil service, and staffed by additional secretaries, joint secretaries, directors, and deputy secretaries, and other personnel, advise the Prime Minister on matters of importance and the follow-up issues as necessary. These personnel have knowledge of interministerial matters, and due to their own experience, they tend to provide informal links in developing integrated policy perspectives. In the administrative matters, they work closely with the Cabinet Secretary. The Prime Minister's office advice is purely for the benefit of the Prime Minister, and since it is not recorded in the files of the government, the Secretariat truly becomes a kind of super ministry. Reflecting on the working of Prime Minister's office, B.G. Deshmukh, formerly Cabinet Secretary and Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, observed, "Many a time it has usurped the powers of the Cabinet Secretariat and actively interfered with the working of various ministries and departments. It has not only come to represent the authority and power of the Prime Minister, but people who are part of the Prime Minister's office had acquired power and authority of their own in the name of the Prime Minister. As the political head of the civil service, the Prime Minister exercises control over the machinery of government. Through the appointment committee of the cabinet, of which he is the chairperson, the Prime Minister takes decisions regarding appointments to the posts of administrative secretaries, chairperson, managing directors and general managers of state-owned public corporations, companies and enterprises, including Governor of Reserve Bank of India and other appointments which require the approval of the Government of India.